An welche Person muss man denken, wenn man die Worte Visionär und Multimilliarden-Dollar-Imperium hört? Der am meisten übersehene Unternehmer unserer Generation ist wahrscheinlich dieser Typ hier.
I don't give a fuck.
In den letzten 20 Jahren verwandelte Dana White ein bankrottes Unternehmen zu einer der größten Sportorganisationen der Welt.
And everybody's like, wow, that's the greatest investment in the history of mankind. That's unbelievable. Well, let me tell you the rest of the story.
Natürlich ist es unmöglich, so erfolgreich zu werden, ohne sich Feinde zu machen.
Negativity on social media, negativity from the media.
UFC are a bunch of skinhead white guys rolling around like homosexuals on the ground.
The UFC is complete garbage. It's sort of like human cockfighting in my view.
Manche von ihnen kommen aus sehr unerwarteten Ecken.
He's not a good person. He seems to have lost his character somewhere along the way.
Im Schatten der UFC operieren viele mächtige Männer, weit weg vom Rampenlicht. Durch die Übernahme der ehemaligen illegalen Organisation wurde MMA zu dem am schnellsten wachsenden Sport unserer Generation.
You took a $2 million business into a $4 billion business.
Since 1993, martial arts has evolved more than it has in the last 10,000 years, and it's continuing to evolve.
It's overtaken boxing. It's the #1 combat sport.
Der Aufstieg der UFC ist von politischen Katastrophen, Drogenskandalen und Begegnungen mit der Mafia geprägt. Wir sprechen hier von einer der größten und kontroversesten unternehmerischen Erfolgsgeschichten aller Zeiten.
You have achieved a dominance in MMA that every boxing promoter dreams of.
It's all out there for the taking right now. Nothing is impossible. Yeah. We've had a really incredible journey.
Das ist die Geschichte der UFC. Alles fängt mit diesem Mann an, Rorion Gracie. Im Jahre 1970 eröffnete er mit seiner Familie eine Kampfschule in seiner Garage, um dort BJJ zu unterrichten.
Well, I started teaching class on my garage first, and everybody I met, I invited for a free class on my garage in Hermosa Beach.
Die Geschäftsidee hatte aber einen Haken. Zu dieser Zeit konnte kaum jemand etwas mit den Begriffen MMA oder BJJ in Amerika anfangen. Den Gracies war dieses Problem durchaus bewusst, weswegen sie eine eigene Serie starteten. Der Name der Videoreihe lautete Gracies in Action. Und das Konzept ist wirklich interessant, denn verschiedene Familienmitglieder traten gegen Kämpfer aus unterschiedlichen Disziplinen an und besiegten diese.
My idea, it was not just to compare Jiu-Jitsu to 8 styles of martial arts, but compare Gracie Jiu-Jitsu to every single style of martial art out there.
So konnten sie demonstrieren, dass BJJ den anderen Kampfsportarten überlegen ist. Diese Videoreihe zog die Aufmerksamkeit eines weiteren wichtigen Akteurs auf sich, und zwar Art Davie. Davie wollte eigene Kämpfe veranstalten, bei denen Vertreter verschiedener Kampfsportarten gegeneinander antraten.
It's a tournament. It's an 8-man single elimination tournament.
So that's when Art and I came up with the concept of developing something that would show the world in a much bigger, much better media, which would be television.
So taten er und Rorion sich zusammen, um ein 8-Mann-K.O.-Turnier unter dem Namen War of the Worlds auf die Beine zu stellen.
Start selecting the toughest, meanest, ugliest, heaviest, most qualified people we could.
Um das Turnier zu realisieren, fehlte aber noch eine bestimmte Sache: Kapital.
Then I came back and I wrote this business plan. 65 pages.
And then he comes in a little suit, very smooth talker, good salesman, and a little pitch, and he's got this idea for, we want to do this together. He has concept of doing marketing and this and that.
Davie war erfolgreich und konnte mit 28 Investoren Verträge abschließen. So wurde das Startkapital für die Organisation gesichert. Schon damals war allen Beteiligten klar, dass das ganze Projekt nur mit einer Fernsehpräsenz funktionieren kann.
I got turned down by HBO. I got turned down by Showtime. I got turned down by ESPN. I was lucky in that I found Semaphore Entertainment Group.
Der Pay-Per-View-Sender war mit dem Namen War of the Worlds aber nicht einverstanden, weswegen dieser Name gestrichen wurde und ein neuer her musste. Zusammen mit dem SEG-Gründer Bob Meyowitz hat man dann die Organisation unter dem neuen Namen The Ultimate Fighting Championship im Jahre 1993 an den Start gebracht. Noch im selben Jahr fand das erste Event in Denver statt. Wie geplant beinhaltete die Veranstaltung Athleten von verschiedensten Disziplinen. Unter anderem 2 Kickboxer, einen Savate-Schwarzgurt, einen Karate-Experten, einen Ringer, einen Sumo-Ringer, einen Boxer und einen BJJ-Schwarzgurt.
The first one comes out and it's basically being advertised as 2 men enter the cage, 1 man leaves. Like somebody's gonna die.
This is the bloodiest, most brutal spectacle in the history of mankind.
Dieses Spektakel füllte die Arena zwar nur zur Hälfte, trotzdem war es für die SEG mit über 80.000 verkauften Pay-Per-View-Einheiten ein Erfolg.
So the first event went beautifully, in my opinion. I was very pleased.
Mit heutigen MMA-Kämpfen hatte diese Veranstaltung aber nichts zu tun. Gewichtsklassen gab es nicht. Geschichten wie Kopfstöße, Haare ziehen und Schläge in die Leistengegend waren zwar unerwünscht, aber erlaubt. Es war lediglich verboten, seinen Kontrahenten zu beißen und ihm in die Augen zu stechen.
They put on this event, that first pay-per-view did so well, they were like, well, Jesus, we gotta do this again. So they kept doing it and doing it and doing it. They never expected this thing to turn into a sport.
Durch dieses fragwürdige Regelwerk kam es bei dem 4. Event zu einem schicksalshaften Kampf, welcher den Kurs der UFC nachhaltig verändern sollte. Keith Hackney schlug mehrmals in den Leistenbereich von Joe Son. Durch diesen brutalen Kampf wurden diverse Regulierungsbehörden auf die noch junge Organisation aufmerksam gemacht.
They weren't being regulated. You have to be regulated. There has to be an athletic commission that oversees you. They make sure that the health and safety of the fighters is there. You're getting the proper medical testing, making sure that you have enough money to pay these fighters when the fight is over. And they didn't want to do that. They ran from regulation.
He said, what are you doing? You can't go put on fights that aren't regulated by the athletic commission.
Das war aber noch nicht alles.
Well, eventually Senator John McCain stepped in.
What it was at the beginning was human cockfighting. It was. I mean, I've seen people repeatedly getting smashed in the face with a guy sitting on top of them. That's not a sport.
Der Senator bat die Gouverneure aller 50 US-Bundesstaaten, die UFC zu verbieten.
There was no referee, there was nothing. It was terrible.
Ein Großteil der Staaten folgten seinem Aufruf.
When they started getting contacted saying, hey, listen, you guys can't put on fights in unregulated states, the owner basically said, we'll go to Puerto Rico, we'll go to Alabama, we'll go to all these places where you can't touch us and we'll put on these events.
Trust me when I say this. I've been in business for a long time. You can't mess with the government. Tell the government you're not going to do what they want you to do. See what happens.
Arizona Senator John McCain to ban ultimate fighting, taking it too far.
John McCain legte sogar noch eine Schippe drauf. Er startete zusätzlich eine Briefkampagne, um die UFC bei verschiedensten Pay-Per-View-Lieferanten aus dem Programm nehmen zu lassen. Das Resultat dieser Maßnahme war, dass Amerikas größter Pay-Per-View-Lieferant Viewers Choice sowie einige kleinere Anbieter die UFC vollständig aus dem Programm genommen haben.
It wasn't allowed on pay-per-view.
Porn is on pay-per-view.
But the UFC was not.
So now the cable companies wouldn't put them on pay-per-view. The ATM machine was cut off.
Die UFC hatte also ein dickes Problem. So war es wirklich alles andere als verwunderlich, dass Davey und Gracie das sinkende Schiff verließen und ihre Anteile an SEG verkauften. Somit blieb lediglich Bob Meyowitz als Gesellschafter übrig. Die Zahlen sanken weiter und weiter. Als die Organisation kurz vor dem Bankrott steht, kommt es zu einer schicksalshaften Situation. Bei dem 27. Event befanden sich 2 Personen unter den Zuschauern, welche alles verändern sollten.
We'd go to these fights and we'd walk in and it was nothing that what we expected. There was no energy in the crowd. 1/16 full. There's nobody there. I wanted to buy a program. They didn't have a program. I wanted to buy a T-shirt. You can buy a T-shirt.
Lasst euch von diesem Mann nicht täuschen. Er sieht zwar ruhig und gesammelt aus, er ist jedoch ein gnadenloser Geschäftsmann. Er hört auf den Namen Lorenzo Fertitta.
The Fertitta brothers own Station Casinos in Las Vegas, which is the 4th largest gaming company in the country.
Die zweite Person im Bunde hat sich ihr ganzes Leben auf diesen Moment vorbereitet.
I had a hardcore upbringing, I didn't grow up with money. I came from a family with a single mom. My dad was an alcoholic and was never around, and when he did show up, you didn't want him around. You know what I mean? My mother, she worked a lot, wasn't around, so me and my sister were home a lot alone. We had to clean the house and do all the stuff that you have to do when you're a kid. But one of the things I think about growing up alone is, there's a lot of stuff that you have to learn on your own.
He just had this great personality. People were attracted to him. Guys liked him, girls liked him. They wanted to be his friend. They liked hanging out with him.
you went to school with Lorenzo, your partner now.
Me and Dana go way back to the time we were like 14, 15 years old. Knew each other all through high school.
Yeah, I got kicked out of high school a bunch of times and had to go to different schools. I was just never a school guy.
I mean, Dana has a high school education and that's it.
My mother used to tell me that I was gonna be just like my father and not amount to anything and things like that, and I was gonna be pumping gas into my friends' cars. My mom did a lot of shit like that, and I'm not saying that that's what drove me, but that didn't hurt. You know what I mean?
After high school, kind of went our own ways. I went off to college. He went off and did what he did in Boston.
I worked in Boston at a place called the Boston Harbor Hotel. And I was literally standing in the lobby one day, and I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? What am I doing here? This isn't me. This isn't what I want.
It's like half the battle in life is figuring out who you are and what you want to do for the rest of it.
And I walked out the front door, and one of my good friends, who was the doorman, says, what are you doing? I said, I'm quitting. And he's like, what? What are you going to do? I said, I want to be in the fight business. He said, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life.
So I took all the risks at a young age. If you don't take risks, you will never succeed, ever. I found this guy named Peter Welsh, who was a fighting legend. He became my professor, my sensei, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Taught me everything about the fight business. So I was involved in boxing, then I had boxing gyms. And one day I'm actually in there teaching a class.
And these guys walked right in the middle of my class. And they're like, hey, we need to talk to you. And I said, I'm teaching a class here. And they're like, eh.
I leave the class, I go out and start talking to them. And they start asking me if I know who they are. And I don't.
Bei den Männern handelt es sich Gefolgsleute von Whitey Bulger.
Erpressung, Geldwäsche, organisierte Kriminalität und 11-facher Mord. Lange war Bulger nach Osama Bin Laden der meistgesuchte Verbrecher der USA.
He murdered people there, he buried people there, and he went to sleep there. So that's his world.
So Whitey Bulger had a guy who worked under him, and his name was Kevin Weeks. So, yeah, they wanted $2,500 from me.
$2,500, I was 21 years old. You might as well ask me for $25,000. I didn't have $2,500.
What do you do?
I ignored them. I didn't do anything. I wasn't going out of my way to try to bump into them again or to do anything else. And then
months went by.
Oh, wow.
Months went by. And one day I got a call at my apartment. Somebody on the phone said,
you lost that money and you want to touch tomorrow.
I said, I don't have it. And they said,
we better come up with it.
And I said, or what? He said,
I said, okay. I hung up the phone.
Picked it back up and called Delta and got a one-way ticket to Vegas. A couple months later is when all that stuff happened. They started digging up the bodies at the beach. He fled, and the whole thing came crumbling down like months later.
Dana zieht zurück nach Vegas, wo sich erneut mit Lorenzo Fertitta zusammentut.
And we started taking jiu-jitsu and fell in love with it. We became addicted to it.
Through that, we started to meet a lot of the fighters.
And we were blown away by these UFC guys.
At the time, I was on the Nevada State Athletic Commission, so we obviously had some common interest. So I'm sitting at the fight with Dana and I'm going,
imagine if they did this and imagine if they did that. This thing could be big. When you figure this out, this has the potential to be the biggest business on earth. I started to represent and manage Chuck the Iceman Liddell and Tito Ortiz.
So sitzt Dana plötzlich mit dem UFC-Gründer Bob Mayowitz an einem Tisch.
I got into this huge contract battle over Tito's contract with the old owner. I was talking about pay-per-view and he flipped out. He says, there is no fucking pay-per-view. There's no money. And he freaks out and I was like, holy shit, this thing's in trouble.
Yeah. They were going bankrupt. We hung up, I called Frank and Lorenzo.
He goes, Lorenzo, I just heard that the UFC is going to be sold.
These guys are in big trouble. They're losing money. I think we can buy it.
So I called Bob, literally cold called him. He wanted to bring on an investor. He was looking for somebody to put up $1 million for 50% of the company. I ended up calling back and just said, look, we'd be interested in doing the deal, but we want to buy the whole thing.
So the brothers put up the money, and a month later we owned the company.
Die Fertitta-Brüder gründeten eine Muttergesellschaft mit dem Namen ZUFA. ZUFA ist italienisch und bedeutet so viel wie Kampf. Die UFC wurde somit zur Tochtergesellschaft von ZUFA. Und ZUFAs allererster Mitarbeiter war Dana White.
They made me the president of the company and they gave me 10%. I bought books on finance. I bought books on PR. That was how I learned. My office was a broom closet with a telephone when we started this thing. Everybody they had, all these smart guys and all these geniuses that came from Harvard and everywhere else, hated this thing.
Do you agree with Dana that MMA will one day be the biggest sport in the whole world?
I do. I really do. And I know that sounds crazy.
You want to be bigger than the NFL. That's going to be hard.
Well, not on a global basis.
The NFL. There's nothing bigger than the NFL. It's huge. But in other parts of the world, the NFL isn't big like it is here. In India, cricket's huge. I don't know about you, but I don't give a shit about cricket. Soccer is big all over the world. It's not that big here. And the list goes on and on of sports that work in other countries and don't work in other countries. The one thing that I believe would work everywhere is fighting. I don't care what color you are, what country you come from, or what language you speak. Fighting is in our DNA. We get it and we like it. We're human beings.
Viele Leute haben es für unmöglich gehalten, dass die UFC sich von der derzeitigen Situation nochmal erholen kann. Dana stand vor einer riesen Aufgabe.
People think I swear a lot now. You should have heard me the first 3 years of this company.
Als sie die UFC kauften, war so ziemlich alles, was sie für die 2 Millionen bekommen haben, ein Logo.
It was essentially you bought the name and a
old wooden octagon
for $2 million.
Yeah, and I think we had like 11 guys under contract.
He had sold everything off. The DVD rights, the video game rights, the merchandise rights, all the things that you need to build a brand were gone. We didn't even own UFC.com. UFC.com used to be user-friendly computers.
Die UFC war zum Zeitpunkt der Übernahme im Fernsehen verboten. Außerdem war MMA in den meisten Staaten national und international illegal. Und zu guter Letzt gewinnt ein Konkurrent im asiatischen Raum immer mehr an Größe. Die Rede ist von Pride FC.
The only two companies in this world that matter are the UFC and Pride.
Im Jahr 2001 füllte Pride bereits Stadien in Japan, denn dort war MMA viel etablierter als in Amerika. Sie hatten die besten Kämpfer der Welt, einschließlich der amerikanischen.
And make no mistake about it, the UFC is coming here to kick your ass.
Wie kommt man als Unternehmen aus dieser Situation wieder raus?
The first 3 years of this company was it was war. And that's literally what I did. I'd yell on the phone, you, you.
We saw what we thought it could be if it was done the right way, marketed the right way.
The old owner ran from regulation. We did the exact opposite. We ran toward regulation.
Die UFC beginnt mit der Annahme einer Reihe einheitlicher Regeln. So wird eine Argumentationsgrundlage bei Verhandlungen mit den Sportkommissionen geschafft.
And that's where Lorenzo Fertitta comes in. So Lorenzo was a former regulator himself. He was the head of the Nevada State Athletic Commission. So we went in and we met with California, Nevada, New York, New Jersey, and the list goes on and on. So we went to these state athletic commissions and said, this is a real sport, these guys are real athletes.
And I had to fly to places and literally had to wait outside people's offices for them to come out and grab them. You know, they didn't want anything to do with the UFC.
What's your superpower there?
That I'm a savage. I get out there and I'll outwork anybody. When we bought this company, venues did not want the UFC at their arena. The first guy who gave us our break when we bought the company was Donald Trump.
That guy's been a friend of mine for 20 years. He's one of the most stand-up, solid dudes that I've ever met in my life.
The first fight we ever had was at the Trump Taj Mahal. And he showed up for the first fight and stayed till the main event. You have to understand what my job is. What my job is, in this day and age, I have to convince you to stay home on Saturday when you've been busting your ass at school all week, working, all the other things you gotta do. You probably wanna go out and, meet some girls or take your girl out to dinner or go to a movie. I have to convince you to stay home on Saturday and pay $55 to watch my event. Our goal was to buy it and get it on free television. People thought that was insane.
Natürlich kann Dana nicht alles alleine bewältigen. Was er benötigt, sind Experten in jeweiligen Fachgebieten.
Well, my name is Lawrence Epstein, first of all, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the Ultimate Fighting Championship. I'm responsible for day-to-day operations of the company.
Er gewinnt sogar den Geschäftsführer der Nevada State Athletic Commission für seine Sache und kann diesen als Mitarbeiter einstellen.
Next to Mark Ratner, who is the Senior Vice President of Government and Regulatory Affairs. Did I get that right?
That's exactly right, yes. It was a hard decision for me to make. It's pretty hard to tell Lorenzo and Dana no.
And what does that title mean exactly?
It means I go around the states and countries to get the sport of MMA approved.
Um sicherzustellen, dass die besten Kampfpaarungen entstehen, werden Joe Silver und Sean Shelby als Matchmaker eingesetzt.
I've been with UFC for 9 years now, and I just had a good eye for it.
Sie sind auch ständig auf der Suche nach neuen Kämpfern.
If there's a fight on camera, we've probably seen it between the two of us.
When you spend your money to come see my event, you better be entertained.
Um die Produktionsqualität aller Veranstaltungen zu verbessern, macht die UFC alles aus eigener Hand.
So then we all had to dive in and learn about production.
Trotz aller Bemühungen schaffte die Organisation es einfach nicht, grüne Zahlen zu schreiben.
We were burning cash. We ended up burning like $44 million. And this thing really isn't getting any traction yet.
It just wasn't generating the money, right? So you're just putting the money in, putting the money in, putting the money in.
Lorenzo called me one day. I was in my office and he's like,
when do we pull the plug on this thing? Is this thing gonna work?
I can't keep doing this to my family and blowing all my family's money on this thing, man. Get out there and see what you can sell this thing for. And I was like, fuck. I called him back at the end of the day and I said, maybe we can get $5 or $6 million for this thing.
Lorenzo calls you the next day and essentially says, fuck it.
He literally said fuck it.
Okay, so he literally says fuck it.
Fuck it.
Fuck it.
Fuck it. Let's keep going.
Die UFC startete einen weiteren Angriff und holte sich dabei Inspiration beim Wrestling.
The only reason why professional wrestling does big buy rates on pay-per-view is because they have a weekly television show that acts like an infomercial for it.
We need to come up with a reality show. Literally, me and my team went into my office at like 8 o'clock at night, and we bounced a zillion different concepts around, and that's the one we came up with. So all these guys live in a house. They're coached by 2 big stars in the UFC, and they fight. Every time you fight and you lose, you get eliminated.
It's about, do you want to be a fighter?
And it would end with a finale. 2 guys fight in the finale. 1 guy becomes the Ultimate Fighter and gets a contract with the UFC.
Die Idee ist einfach und genial zugleich. Sie nutzten Reality-TV, um sich ins Fernsehen zu mogeln.
But at the end of every episode, there's a live fight. You know what I mean? There was a fight that would be on TV.
That was the last $10 million investment the brothers were putting in. They're like, this is it. We're going to give this thing a shot. If it works, good. If it doesn't, that's a wrap. It's over.
So we're $44 million in the hole, and we're out trying to pitch this thing to television.
We were literally begging everybody to take us on TV. We couldn't find anybody.
So they're terrified to put this thing on. This was something that was banned and marketed as the brutal, most violent sport in the world. So we go out and start pitching this thing, and nobody wants it. Nobody has any balls on television, man. None of these guys do.
We ultimately found Viacom Spike Network to take us.
Calling themselves the Men's Network. We're like, oh, this is perfect for us. The network for men. They can't deny this. They denied it. They hated the idea.
They couldn't wait to get the fuck out of this meeting.
And they said they wouldn't pay us for the content.
So what we said is, how about if we pay for it and give it to you for free? Oh, they like that idea a lot better. We threw this thing on Spike TV with 0 advertising.
And the fucking thing goes like this. Takes off.
2.3 million viewers on cable with a new show on a network nobody had ever heard of. I mean, it's the biggest home run ever.
Als sich endlich ein wenig Optimismus breit machte, kam es zu einer weiteren Katastrophe.
At the time, the president of the company got fired.
They had made all these promises to me and everything else, all dead. Nothing. So we go through this whole season. It's unbelievably successful, and we honestly didn't know if we were going to have a second season.
We go into the finale. We have no deal. Nothing.
So we get to the finale. Kenny Florian fights a guy named Diego Sanchez. They go out there and fight. Diego Sanchez smokes him in like 40 seconds. Terrible. We've got 2 hours of programming to fill. I'm like, oh my God, this is a nightmare. But the savior, Stephan Bonner and Forrest Griffin. So these 2 guys come out and they put on the sickest fight you have ever seen in your life.
And the numbers during the fight went just like this.
The place is going crazy.
People were stomping their feet and it sounded like a train was going through the arena. And at the end of the fight, people were chanting one more round, one more round.
Yeah. We ended up giving both guys a UFC contract that night, which made the place even go crazier.
Frank, Lorenzo, and I have gotten together and we've decided there is no loser in this fight. And we're going to offer Stephan Bonner a 6-figure contract with the UFC.
I knew when that fight was over, it didn't matter if we did another deal with Spike TV or didn't do another deal. We did it. We made it. We were going somewhere.
Yeah. We literally got up out of our chairs, walked out into the alley, and cut the deal for season 2 with Spike TV that night.
And we cut a new deal written on a napkin.
I know that sounds dramatic, but it's true. If that first season didn't happen, I would not be sitting here right now.
It's the craziest fucking story ever. You literally couldn't write this shit.
Jetzt ging es erst richtig los. Nach diesem Erfolg werden Projekte wie UFC Unleashed, Fight Nights, Countdown und sogar ein Videospiel UFC Undisputed ins Leben gerufen. Die UFC hat ein geniales Geschäftskonzept entwickelt. Guckt euch das an. Die Strategie hat 4 Aspekte: Anziehen, Konvertieren, vertiefen und erweitern. Neue Fans werden mit den kostenlosen Inhalten geködert, um sie dann mit den Pay-Per-View-Tickets zu konvertieren. Und ganz nebenbei bietet man dem Fan weitere Produkte und Erfahrungen an. Es geht darum, immer mehr Menschen in diesen Kreislauf zu bekommen. Was die UFC jetzt mehr als alles andere braucht, sind Kämpfe.
We need more fights. We need more fights, more fights.
Eine andere Organisation spielt der UFC jetzt genau in die Karten. Die Rede ist von der japanischen Mafia. Das Gerücht verbreitete sich, dass die Yakuza bei Pride FC mitmischt. Sie nutzten die Organisation, um Geld zu waschen, indem sie Geld auf Kämpfe setzten und dann deren Ausgang beeinflussten. Als die Fernsehunternehmen das erfuhren, brachen sie sämtliche Verbindungen zu Pride FC ab. Pride ging praktisch innerhalb eines Jahres in den Konkurs. Dreimal könnt ihr jetzt raten, von wem Pride aufgekauft wurde. Selbstverständlich von der UFC. Durch den Kauf von Pride hatte die UFC jetzt eine riesige Bibliothek an Kämpfen. So konnten sie sämtliche Konkurrenz ausspielen und ich erkläre euch auch wie. Die UFC hat in jeder Nacht, in der ein Konkurrent Pay-Per-View-Tickets verkauft hat, Top-Kämpfe kostenlos ausgestrahlt. Als Fan hatte man dann die Wahl, entweder ein Pay-Per-View-Ticket für eine zweitklassige Organisation zu kaufen oder sich kostenlos Top-Kämpfe von der UFC und Pride anzusehen. Wie ihr euch sicher denken könnt, fiel da die Entscheidung nicht schwer. Durch das Kaufen weiterer Organisationen wuchs die Bibliothek noch weiter.
Is WEC merging with the UFC?
Yes.
UFC has purchased Strikeforce. Is that true?
That is true.
So war die UFC in der Lage, noch mehr Inhalte kostenlos auszustrahlen, um auch die letzten Mitbewerber aus dem Geschäft treiben zu können.
We've got a library of 20,000 hours of original content.
Der Wachstum der Organisation ist somit exponentiell. Im Jahr 2011 kommt es dann zu einem weiteren Meilenstein.
We ended up doing a huge deal with Fox. Fox was the deal that I always wanted.
Now that we're sitting here on the Fox set where they do the NFL, it's really a surreal moment.
We needed to get our content out there, and they spread our content across all their platforms.
Einige Monate nach dem Fox-Deal kommt sogar die ESPN auf die UFC zu. Sie kritisieren die UFC dafür, dass die Kämpfer nicht angemessen bezahlt werden.
Fighters are just coming up to me and saying, look, we don't get paid enough.
It's one thing to sit around with your friends and lie. It's another thing to go on ESPN and lie.
You know, I'm fighting for a world title fight where this fight does 1 million homes and I only get paid $50,000.
He's a liar.
So while there's a huge middle class in the UFC, like everyone's eating, no one's making Floyd Mayweather money.
Plötzlich mischt auch noch der Staat mit.
The government came after us and called us a monopoly.
The multi-billion-dollar antitrust lawsuit it's currently facing from former UFC fighters.
I do believe they have a monopoly. I don't know how anyone could think they don't.
The lawsuit claims the UFC, quote, engaged in an illegal scheme to eliminate competition.
I mean, anyone that starts to even be up and coming at all, they buy them out or they drive them out.
That allows it to pay fighters, quote, a fraction of what they would earn in a competitive marketplace.
We're spending, $7-8 million a year trying to defend ourselves from the government as a monopoly.
Schließlich wird die Anklage fallen gelassen und die UFC konnte weiter expandieren.
There was a time when Marshall Zalaznik was one of the most powerful people in the UFC.
What is your job? To find opportunities in the international market outside of the US and Canada.
Die Kämpfer sind essentiell, wenn es darum geht, auf internationaler Ebene zu expandieren. Sie öffnen die Tür zu verschiedenen Ländern. Die UFC gewinnt beispielsweise Großbritannien mit Michael Bisping oder Kanada mit GSP. Conor McGregor eröffnet Irland.
What's up, man? UFC, man.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Ihm folgt Ronda Rousey, die weibliche Division startet.
Weili Zhang, our Chinese world champion, when she became a champion, she ignited China.
So now we just signed this huge deal over in China.
We've added about 20 states in the last 3 years.
And they have cleaned up their act enormously.
We've done fights in Australia, all throughout Europe. We're doing Poland this year.
Italy is definitely on our target list. Ireland will be on that list. Scotland will be on that list. The UK is obviously on that list.
I mean, we've done fights in the Middle East.
2 years ago, we did 1 fight in Brazil. Last year, we did 3. We'll do 7 this year and 9 next year.
We're very bullish on what India can be.
We just put on an event over in Macau. It was the most successful event in the history of Macau. We break the arena records with ticket sales. It's usually us and the Rolling Stones.
We're everywhere but New York and getting close.
Und schließlich, nach 8 langen Jahren Verhandlung, schafft es Mark, MMA endlich in New York zu legalisieren.
And when I heard the final vote tally, that was the emotional moment for me.
And congratulations on passing the bill.
It was a long time coming. I think this really completes the journey for MMA.
8-year gestation period? Is that what that was?
That was exactly right. And so this is the baby, and now we'll have the big coming out party November 12th. The big moment for me was at the Garden when Conor was fighting Eddie, and the excitement, the crowd, the energy. That was the special night.
The Fertittas were ready to get out.
Lorenzo was done. Lorenzo didn't want to do this anymore.
And they sat me down and said, we're going to sell this thing. And
you got to stay. Nobody's going to buy this thing if you don't stay.
Yeah, I was going to say the contingency was that you stay.
With every group.
You know, these are my best friends. We'd done it together. You know, it fucked me up when we sold. I took off for a little while. I literally went to a hotel and spent 2 days in the hotel, didn't call anybody, didn't return anybody's calls. And
he said, Dana, I'm done. Be happy for me. I don't want to do this anymore.
Am Ende wurde die UFC dann tatsächlich verkauft.
And sold it for $4.025 billion.
The largest deal in the history of sports will officially be revealed to the world this morning by the UFC. A $4 billion deal.
Dieser Mann hat die UFC gekauft. Ari Emanuel.
Ari is fucking awesome. He's awesome. He couldn't have been a better guy to be the guy to come in with me again.
Yeah. Ari musste sich 1,8 Billionen Dollar leihen, um die UFC zu kaufen. Als seine Firma mit UFC Holdings fusionierte, stiegen die Gesamtschulden der Organisation auf 2,3 Billionen Dollar.
Ari's the guy that can pick up the phone and get anybody on the phone. And Ari can raise money like this. Because that's what Ari does and that's what Ari's really good at.
Das Ergebnis dieses Schuldenberges sind 98 Millionen Dollar Zinsen pro Jahr.
Our Fox deal is up. And we're probably not going to end up doing another deal with Fox. You ever hear of John Skipper? John Skipper ran ESPN. Hates UFC.
Hates it.
Hates it.
We got to be very careful about what I say relative to that.
Skipper's never, ever going to take the UFC. So we're in a real tough place. John Skipper's cocaine dealer is going to rat him out.
What?
Here's a shocker. New details revealed about the resignation of the former president of ESPN.
He says he resigned because his drug dealer tried to extort him.
So he has to step down from ESPN right at the time that we're trying to make a TV deal.
January 1st, we're on ESPN with one of the biggest deals they've ever cut in combat sports history.
So UFC is going to be on ESPN now.
Yeah.
No more Fox.
No more
That's
Fox.
done.
The UFC on ESPN.
Now the company's worth $7 billion.
You don't really realize the impact until you get on ESPN.
Yeah.
The impact has been massive. We are literally limited by my imagination right now.
Der ESPN-Deal hat es in sich. Die UFC muss in einem Jahr 43 Events abhalten. Als Aufwandsentschädigung gibt es dann 750 Millionen Dollar. Als man den Vertrag unterschrieben hat, hat natürlich keiner geglaubt, dass es zu einer internationalen Pandemie kommt.
It will forever be known as the day sports shut down.
COVID was the toughest thing I've ever had to navigate in the history of this company. And if you look at where we came from, that's actually saying something.
Companies start laying off big percentages of the workforce. You did not lay people off.
No.
Covid erschwerte das Veranstalten von öffentlichen Events massiv. Die ersten 4 Monate des Jahres vergingen und es wurden gerade einmal 8 von 43 Events organisiert. Das bedeutet, der UFC drohten massive Vertragsstrafen. Es musste eine Lösung her, andernfalls könnte man den Vertrag niemals erfüllen.
At the time, you know, I'm close to the royal family in Abu Dhabi.
So you went to Abu Dhabi?
Yeah, so originally we were looking for an island. Islands made sense.
Dana calls me up. He said, get me an island. I said, what? He said, get me an island. I'm going to put on fights.
The UFC is apparently building a facility on a private island that they're calling Fight Island. Now, is that a clever name? No. Is it the perfect name? Yes.
While sports across the globe go dark amid COVID-19, Dana White says the show will go on for UFC.
That this isn't something that should be happening.
Medical advice is clear. There is still a danger.
And while safety measures are in place, some people want to know, hey, is it safe?
I wouldn't even tell the media where we were holding events during COVID because these scumbags would start calling and trying to get it shut down.
So that allowed you to keep your sport on the air when everything else was shut down.
Right. We're supposed to do 43. That year we did 42. We gained a lot of fans because there was nothing to gamble on. So sports bettors started betting on UFC. When other people weren't playing, our fan base grew 46%. We haven't even got close to where this thing is going to be in the next 5 years.
We've been doing the impossible since 2001.
Nothing is impossible. If you're in business with me, don't tell me no. Nobody in this building ever says no.
If you had one thing that you learned throughout your journey in building the UFC that you could pass along to the next generation, what would that be?
There's a lot of, I tell young people now all the time, I definitely tell my kids, if you are even fucking remotely a savage, you'll run these people over. So it's all out there for the taking right now.
I just keep saying that there's no reason to be that mean and cruel to people all the time.
I actually like chaos. If I don't have it, I'll create it in my own personal life.
I don't believe I've ever brought him up to behave like that.
I'm a savage.
Yeah, I know.
And I was raised by a single mother.
There's something to that.
I would love to see him change, but to have my old Dana back.
For the small group of savages out there, run these fucking kids right over, man. Run them all over.
Do you still love your son?
Of course I do.